Welcome back to Horror Recaps. I'm Freddy, and in a few seconds, you're going to listen to a frightening tale narrated by me. Beware, fear awaits you. The film begins with a group of friends going to a boys' weekend. Vince is distraught over his recent divorce and ignores Neil's phone calls. Graham, on the other hand, refuses to allow his boyfriend to join Neil's planned boys' weekend. There's Mikey, who ignores his wife's warning not to go. She threatens him with divorce and is about to throw away her wedding ring, but Mikey glued the ring while she was sleeping, then walks away. Then there's Patrick, who's listening to stress therapy on his iPod, while his wife complains about him leaving for the weekend. In the end, there's nerd Matt, the owner of a comic shop. Later, Mikey and Graham pick up Vince from his apartment and bring him on the boys' weekend. Except for Vince, who is quiet, they drink and talk in a pub after leaving their houses. Meanwhile, Banksy is getting ready to ride his van when his phone rings beside his keys inside his locked house. Following that, Neil goes over their to-do list once they arrive in the countryside. Soon after, their booked minibus arrives, driven by a driver whom Neil names Candy. Meanwhile, Banksy's van breaks down in the middle of the road. The group travels to Moodley by minibus, and Candy cheers Vince up by saying that there are things worse than divorce. Vince explains that they will stay at Mikey Nan's house in Moodley. When the minibus unexpectedly stops, they find rotten and gutted rams on the road. Suddenly, a phone rings, and they all check their phones because they all use the same ringtone. It turns out that Vince is being called by his ex-wife. Neil orders everyone to put their phones in a bag to focus on the trip. They arrive at Moodley before the sun goes down. When Patrick approaches the village map, everyone notices it's empty. Mikey follows the group and finds a ball with a dash of blood in it. They look around the village, and Graham orders Mikey to break into his Nan's house and prepare it for their stay while the rest of the group waits inside the pub for a drink. Mikey and Matt separate from the group that enters the pub. Matt first stops by a burning witch shop and notices campaign posters for a politician sponsored by Wondwash, a brand of washing soap. Mikey searches for the house keys among garden gnomes while a severed hand clasps on a lawnmower stands beside him. After entering the scenic route, he finally finds the key and notices a bloody handprint on the fence. Neil uses the restroom at the pub and observes the woman in the next stall, who emits a lot of blood. He then rejoins the group and notices the stench in the air. They fail to notice a rotting corpse behind the counter. Neil then leaves to find Matt, who is busy examining a bullet case outside the witchcraft shop. Matt is startled by his sudden appearance and screams like a dolphin. Back to Mikey, he notices a bride eating an intestine behind the fence. When the bride spots him, she grabs the axe and pursues him. Meanwhile, the group is gathered outside the witchcraft shop when they notice a hooded beggar walking down the street. When she faces them, a soldier lunges at the beggar and raises his combat knife to kill them. The group rushes to the two, and Vince tackles and punches the soldier, who flips him over. Neil enters the fight and punches the soldier in the chest, but the soldier knocks him down. Neil's hands are stabbed as the beggar grabs the combat knife. Vince knocks out the soldier as he tries to explain something. Mikey appears behind and smashes the garden gnome on the beggar's head, knocking her out and revealing a horrifying face. While carrying the unconscious soldier, the group rushes to the minibus. When they arrive at the minibus, they discover Candy is also infected. Neil shuts the minibus door and takes the scenic route to Mikey's Nan's house. They come across a gutted soldier pinned to a fence on their way. Neil approaches the body to retrieve the gun when he grunts and wakes up, informing them that it is empty. When Vince asks what's in the woods, he warns, "Don't go in there." The infected bride appears from nowhere and splits the gutted soldier's head in half. The group screams and flees to Mikey's Nan's house. Mikey searches for the key while his friends throw paint buckets at the approaching horde. The infected creature attacks Matt from behind, but Vince temporarily stuns it by splattering it. Mikey eventually finds the key and unlocks the door. Neil calls for help, but the phone line is cut off. Patrick emerges from the kitchen and covers Neil's wound with a damp towel. They start speculating on why women have turned angry and cannibalistic. Vince suspects it's something in the air because it only affects women. Neil looks out the window and is taken aback by the crows crowing. Their scream jolts the soldier awake, who says that all men are dead. Matt assumes it's a biological weapon that has gone rogue, but the soldier responds that it's classified. As they approach the soldier, the tension rises until Patrick emerges from the kitchen and says that the kettle is boiling. So they drink tea in the kitchen and discover that the virus only affects women. That night, the boys return to the minibus, but the barmaid and bride are in the back seats when the soldier starts the engine. They exit the minibus quickly, and Patrick plays tug of war with the barmaid with a duffel bag until its strap snaps. The bride attacks Patrick with an axe, but he avoids it and flees to a nearby billboard. However, the bride cuts his leg as he continues to climb the billboard ladder. Patrick searches for the duffel bag from the billboard but only finds golf balls. As a result, he throws the balls at the infected woman. Vince and Matt seek refuge in a toy store, while the soldier, Graham, and Mikey seek refuge in an apparel store. Meanwhile, Neil directs an infected equestrian and a granny zombie at Patrick's scattered golf balls. He then hides inside a house next to the church, thinking he's safe until he's knocked out. Vince fends off the woman at the toy store, who almost gets in because they forgot to lock the door. Matt pours radio-controlled car nitro fluid into the girl's hand and ignites it with Vince's lighter. Graham watches as the infected girl burns in the clothing store, but the soldier pulls him aside and asks him to hide. Mikey nearly falls on the bloody floor and discovers a decapitated man's head on a shelf. The soldier fires his last bullet on an infected saleswoman behind the fitting room. On the other hand, the sound of the gun being fired draws the infected outside. On the other hand, Matt discovers a walkie-talkie on the toy shelves. As a result, he and Vince prepare the remote control car, attach a walkie-talkie to it, and deliver it to the clothing store. Mikey successfully receives the walkie-talkie, allowing the two groups to communicate for the first time. On the other hand, Neil is bound in a chair by an infected obese woman named Miss Fatty. Miss Fatty crawls beneath the table, scratches her fat muscles to reach Neil across, and uses an electric knife to sever his finger. The two groups inside the clothing and toy store devise a strategy. Mikey mounts the severed head on the RC car and hands over control to Vince. Mikey and Graham place their decoy on the street after the soldier dances behind the glass to distract the horde. Vince then rolls the toy's wheels, successfully leading the horde out of the street. Mikey then leaves to look for a suitable vehicle for their escape. He comes across a military truck, but its glass window is too thick to be smashed. Mikey accidentally activates the car's alarm, attracting the horde feasting on the severed head. Mikey's forced to seek refuge in a slaughterhouse. He's accompanied by an infected butcher who's slicing human limbs. Then Mikey's thrown out the window by the butcher. Vince and Matt rush outside, armed with Matt's homemade flamethrower and fueled by nitro fluid and Vince's lighter. The street is already deserted when they storm out of the toy store. However, the infected witch appears behind them and Matt burns her with the flamethrower. The burning witch flees, but the toy store explodes due to a fluid leak from Matt's flamethrower. Then there's Mikey, who survives the butcher after being thrown out and returns to the clothing store. The two discover that the church is a former military base, and Vince uses the walkie-talkie to inform the group in the apparel shop to go there. Following that, the two explore the base and discover a bloody laboratory. Meanwhile, Patrick is knocked off the billboard because the bride has finished chopping off the stand. He dashes to the minibus where Candy is holding his club. He grabs it from her, shuts the minibus door, and hits the approaching bride on the head. He arrives at the church and runs into Mikey and Graham, two soldiers dressed in dresses to blend in with the crowd on the street. When the infected swarm the front door, Neil escapes from Miss Fatty and climbs up the roof. He eventually sees his friends outside the church, but he falls through the roof and back into the house. Neil rejoins his friends, and they all seek refuge inside the church as the infected pursue them. Matt reopens the computers inside, revealing the politician chained to the briefcase. The politician notices the unfamiliar faces and cuts the call short. Outside, the infected women progress to Phase 2, in which they become smarter, faster, and stranger, whereas Phase 1 is characterized by sickness, disorientation, and psychosis. The evolved bride slashes the church door, causing the congregation to panic. The soldier demonstrates the dolphin, which when activated emits high-frequency sonic deterrents that produce a painful sound that include women and is only effective after Phase 2 mutation. However, nothing happens when the soldier presses the button Neil then bursts out, chastising him for their failed experiment. The soldier then reveals that the politician is the delivery girl who gave each household free Wand-Wash soap laced with the virus. The soldier is killed abruptly by Mikey's infected Nan. Matt approaches her from behind and brutally beats her to death. After his rash, aggressive outburst, Matt calms himself down in the laboratory, but when Vince checks on him, the evolved and scorched witch pins and kills Matt. Vince informs the group that Matt has died, and the witch greets them outside the lab. Mikey immediately tackles her, and everyone works together to pin the witch and kill her with her sword. The group then discovers a mountain of men's corpses in the church's basement. As more infected women pursue them, the group takes refuge on the church's roof. Banksy arrives at Moodley and sees his friends on the rooftop. When his friends say that women have turned into evil cannibals, he brings the ladder and believes they are stoned. They use the ladder to get to the other roof, but Graham first stays behind to block the door. Once everyone is crossed, infected women congregate on the grounds, waiting for them to die. Graham attempts to cross the bridge, but Miss Fatty shakes the ladder with her fat muscles, causing Graham to fall. Miss Fatty swats him down with her diabetic meat, and everyone assumes the worst. Graham must have died due to his overweight strike and diabetes overdose. Banksy then drives the remaining group members to his rented small car. Patrick confesses his desire to live longer, while they argue about Banksy's stupid decision. A woman unexpectedly sneaks up behind him and stabs him multiple times. Everyone rushes to the minibus, where the last three fight Candy. Banksy, on the other hand, dies when an infected woman penetrates a broken bottle on his chest. Inside the minibus, Vince is furious at Neil and Mikey for avoiding trouble despite their heinous treatment of women, while their friends who treat women with respect are rejected or killed. He recognizes that some women become bored with a respectful gentleman, so he burns his ex-photo's wife with his lighter and returns to his happy self. The film concludes with the three friends leaving Moodley at dawn. However, they hear Graham speak through a walkie-talkie kept in the basement. So Vince returns to Moodley and is about to beat up the infected when Graham suddenly activates the dolphin's power panel, rendering the infected immobile. Graham walks down the street holding the dolphin. Neil has a brief interaction with the dolphin, but when he throws it at Vince, he fails to catch it, causing the control to break. The infected are now free of the loud sound and chasing after the four survivors, who are laughing as they flee. Make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you can watch more videos like this. Thank you for watching.